It's the middle of the week and we already have so much to discuss, most of it revolving around the man, the myth, the legend himself, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. We thought that it was the biggest surprise of the week that he visited the front line in Bakhmut. But it wasn't, because today he landed in DC and he's scheduled to speak in front of the Congress and meet with Joe Biden. What are they gonna talk about? We receive an unhealthy dose of Russian madness this week. Normally I try to keep it to a just enough level for you, but this week, it's a lot. And a leader of one of the world's greatest superpowers stepped in and made some very concerning statements about the future cooperation between his country and Russia. Meanwhile, back home, Ukrainian people and our authorities are discussing what the future holds for our country. With that, hi, my name is Yulia and you're watching the brief midweek edition where we discuss everything that happened in and pertaining to Ukraine in the past 24 hours, as well as highlight everything important that happened this week in under 20 minutes. Let's go. In what's becoming a Monday morning ritual, Kyiv was attacked by Russian drones again. According to the military administration reports, our air defenses managed to take down 9 of them. But the damage was done, and here are the photos of the consequences. Following the heavy shelling, Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the world leaders, asking them to convene a special peace summit this winter. The Ukrainian formula for peace is 10 clear points that can create a new security architecture, globally important, something that will return freedom to our Ukrainian land, to all our people, and what will serve as guarantees of freedom and security for other nations, and not if, but when it works for Ukrainians. And while the highest elected official in our country was lobbying to restore world peace, the Russian officials are threatening Greece. Why? Because Greece is planning to transfer S-300 air defense missiles to Ukraine, which according to Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, is a gross violation of Russian and Greek intergovernmental relationships, and if fulfilled, is going to result in some consequences. As if Greece cares for having intergovernmental relationships with the pariah of the world, but oh well. It is not too late to abandon dangerous plans. We once again warned the Greek leadership of responsibility. My question here is, what are they gonna do? What ability has Russia right now to provide consequences to anyone? Unfortunately, Greece was not the only country as of recent that had the pleasure of meeting the Russian world. Upon approving a huge military aid package for Ukraine, the largest one so far, the Finnish president came out and said that he rejects Emmanuel Macron's offer to provide Russia with security guarantees. And right after that, the Finnish embassy in Moscow was vandalized by a group of anonymous people wearing masks. Take a look. What a fantastic way to build international relationships, issuing threats, destructing property, and giving the idea to other European officials that you are planning to invade them as well. Head of the Information and Security Services of Moldova fears that Russia might invade them as well in 2023, or at least attempt to, because let's face it, Russia will not have enough ammunition, manpower, or equipment to really invade anyone. But despite that, he believes that the timing of the invasion would depend on how the events unfold in Ukraine. According to him, the Russian officials are planning on creating a corridor through Transnistria, where their troops are currently stationed, to make way to the Moldovan capital of Chisinau. And he believes the risk of the invasion is high. I personally don't think so, because the amount of Russian troops stationed there is very low, and the likelihood of them being thrown onto the front line in Ukraine is much higher than that, provided that Russia is already struggling to mobilize. But Mustida says, the question is not whether Russia will launch a new offensive towards the Moldovan territory, but when it will happen, at the beginning of the year, in January, February, or later, in March or April. Hopefully by then the Russian troops are going to be so weakened on the territory of Ukraine that they could only imagine new offensives in their wildest dreams. Well, Russia might not have anything left to attack with by April or March, Because the Ukraine's main intelligence directorate just came out with a statement admitting that there are Ukrainian agents who have been working on the territory of the Russian Federation since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. According to the head of the organization, they have been conducting special operations using various means. These operations are complex and require special preparations in advance because Russians are well guarding their military facilities. So that begs a question. Remember those fires in Russia that have been happening all throughout the last couple of months? And we were all wondering, did Russians finally wake up? Were those the Ukrainian drones with a crazy range? I think it was something else, and that something else is Ukrainian agents with matches, gasoline, and lighters. Or torches? Large lighters? And matches? Anyways, our targets are purely military, objects of the Russian armed forces from which strikes on Ukraine are carried out, in particular logistics centers, command posts, or garrisons with a large number of soldiers. So it's safe to say then that all of those malls in Russia that were on fire are just an insurance fraud. Ah, good old Russia. And while Ukraine seems to have the enemy radar covered, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is trying to help us cover the front. He urges the world officials to ignore all of Russia's calls for a ceasefire until they back up and leave the territory of Ukraine. And in order for us to accomplish that faster, Great Britain has vowed to supply Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of artillery ammunition throughout 2023. Speaking of packing up and leaving, a 16-year-old boy from Mariupol who was forcefully relocated to Russia and adopted into a Russian family against his will, not only didn't speak to his new parents at all, he found a way to contact a Ukrainian missing persons chatbot on Telegram, let them know his full name and all of his information and his location, and requested to be sent back to Ukraine. And now we move on to Russia. Normally I try to keep this bit about Russian madness to a minimum, but just enough. Unfortunately today, there is so much madness coming out of Russia. And we're gonna start with my favorite one. We all know that Russia has been having trouble finding volunteers that want to go die on the front lines in Ukraine, but they're also having problems with mobilization. And that's why they have released this masterpiece of recruitment advertising.
Дед, я сфоткал. Что делать? Выставляй на продажу. Хорошо. Дед, ты что тут стоишь? Мне никто не звонил? Завтра в обед придут. Ну ладно.
Дед, долго еще? Мне вообще-то ехать надо.
Да, конечно, извините.
Значит, сразу говорю, 30-ку больше не дам.
Как 30? В объявлении же 60 было.
Дед, ты свою машину видел?
30. Ну мы же договаривались.
Это корыто старше меня.
30 не могу. Мне 60. Очень надо.
Либо 30, либо ничего. Даю минуту подумать.
Ладно. Делать нечего.
Дед!
Саша?
Не надо нашу ласточку продавать. А вас я более не смею задерживать. Вы, конечно, извините за беспокойство, но свой шанс вы уже упустили. Дед, я контракт подписал. Теперь уж точно не пропадем.
Of course, the best way to convince a broke Russian to sacrifice his life for his motherland is a promise of a copious paycheck. Unfortunately, most of them are probably not gonna see it, but their families might in a form of our favorite, Lada. That is, if the Russian government starts actually paying their fallen servicemen's families and their active duty servicemen. But as we say, it's the thought that counts, right? Let me know in the comments if these videos would convince you to join the Russian military. And of course, to amplify the importance of conscription, Vladimir Putin spoke at the expanded meeting of the Russian Defense Ministry Board. Here are his most important points. 1. intercontinental Sarmat missiles will be put on duty soon. Those are the missiles that were supposed to come out about a year ago, but Russia keeps postponing their manufacturing. And that might be because they're sanctioned out of the wazoo and actually can't manufacture them. Time is a relative concept. Today, the military potential and capabilities of almost all NATO member countries are used against Russia. I'm gonna quote Volodymyr Zelensky from the David Letterman interview on this one, and I'm gonna include the link to watch it in the description. Russia is at war with NATO, but NATO haven't showed up yet. 3. The safe life of our citizens is going to be ensured on all territories of Russia, even the new ones. Yes, you are ensuring the safety of people in Mariupol so much, because they live with water, heat, all basic necessities. 4. The combat capabilities of Russian armed forces are increasing every day. Might that be why the mothers and wives and sisters and whoever of the conscripted men are reaching out to Russian military bloggers to beg them for at least uniforms for their conscripted relatives? Yeah, for sure. 5. Russia will continue developing the nuclear triad, as it's the only way to guarantee the country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Who is attacking you again? And for dessert, 6. Russia has sufficient experience in developing underwater drones. The industry is also capable of developing air and ground drones as well. Is that why your soldiers steal microchips from washing machines in Ukraine? Or mount literal Canon DSLRs onto the drones with scotch tape and glue? Must be because it's so advanced of technology that no one gets it yet. And the meeting commenced with stressing the importance of increasing the number of Russian armed forces to 1.5 million personnel, including 670,000 contractors. Hey, Russian military bloggers, if you hear me, brace yourselves. You're about to get a lot of uniform requests. And speaking of advanced technologies, the former head of Roscosmos was celebrating his birthday in Donetsk. And as it happens with Russians, somebody probably smoked in the wrong place and the restaurant exploded. Dmitry Rogozin himself suffered a penetrating wound to his buttocks.
Phrasing. Boom.
It's so ironic. However, unfortunately, more people than just him suffered from this explosion, and there are already confirmations of dead and wounded. However, the numbers are not released as of yet. The head of the private military company Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has decided that he supports the idea of sending Russian female prisoners to the war in Ukraine. The original idea was to send them there as signalers, doctors, and nurses. But Prigozhin has something more in mind. Not only as nurses and signalers, but also in sabotage groups and sniper pairs. Everyone knows that it was widely used. We are working in this direction. There is resistance, but I think we will push on. Yeah, I wonder why the women are resisting. I see no reasons to. And right on time for this speech, Ukrainska Pravda, a Ukrainian newspaper, talked to a captured serviceman of Wagner, who was captured on the front lines. He informed that PMC Wagner recruits from penal colonies all over Russia, promising money, a chance to return to a normal life, and amnesty after 6 months of participation in the warfare. To sweeten the deal, the recruiters tell those prisoners that Ukraine no longer exists and that they will be fighting mercenaries from United States and Poland, while in reality they're being thrown into a meat grinder from which most of them don't come out alive. Sounds like a great deal, doesn't it? Get out of prison and get 6 feet under. And despite the international media space being filled with Russian atrocities and new madness every day, Chinese authorities don't care. Their President Xi Jinping, in conversation with Russian former president, former prime minister, and now Security Council Deputy Medvedev, called the invasion of Ukraine a Ukrainian crisis and reiterated his plans for further cooperation with Russia. According to him, China hopes for comprehensive dialogue between the parties and hopes to resolve the issue diplomatically. And that comes right after the international media reported that Jinping instructed his government to establish closer economic ties with Russia. Well, enough of this, let's talk about Ukraine. Alexei Danilov, the Secretary of National Defense and Security Council, thinks that the next coming months are going to be decisive in the war. We understand that today the Russian Federation has no capabilities to defeat us in open battle. They're now driven into a dead end. And the rat that is driven into a dead end is the most dangerous. And we are preparing very actively for the next month or 2 or 3, which may be decisive at this moment. He also noted that Ukraine today understands all of the risks and challenges that might be coming our way. We're preparing for them as much as we can, but we also understand that the assistance of international partners is urgently needed. While Danilov is being very realistic, Ukrainians are being very optimistic. According to a survey conducted by Kyiv's International Institute for Sociology, 80% of Ukrainians see a bright future for our country. And that's despite the full-scale invasion, all of the social, economic, and energy issues that are caused by it. As someone whose parents live in a war zone, it's incredibly comforting to hear such a statistic, especially because my family doesn't always feel those emotions. Sometimes my dad calls me and he doesn't see the future at all. Sometimes my mom gets down too. It's very good that most people in our country wake up every morning and know that tomorrow might be worse, but the near future is going to be much better than what the alternative would have been if we didn't fight so hard against this invasion. And it's good to be reminded of that too, so if you have a Ukrainian friend who isn't feeling so well, cheer them up. Our citizens are looking into the future, and some of our authorities are looking into the past, and for good reason. Security Bureau of Ukraine is currently conducting an investigation as to how the Russian forces were able to advance so quickly from the occupied Crimea to the south, particularly to Mariupol. As you might remember, Mariupol didn't face any resistance on its southern border. All of the fighting was going on in the north because Russians just came in. How did that happen? And more importantly, who allowed it to happen? What are your thoughts on it? Let me know in the comments. As we know, US has been one of Ukraine's closest allies in fighting this invasion. However, there is one thing that they continuously refuse to do, and that is name Russia as a terrorist state officially. Today, the leadership of the US Congress is working to quickly introduce a bill that will condemn Russia as an aggressor, but naming it as the former is apparently out of question. And that makes for one of those things that makes the bright future of Ukraine seem a little further than we would want. 10 months after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said, "I need ammo, not a ride," he got both. Today, he landed just outside of DC in a US military plane to meet with Joe Biden and deliver a speech in front of the US Congress. His visit is happening in the 300th day of our fight for freedom and marks a historic event, as it's the first time that he had left Ukraine since February 24th. In honor of that, President Joe Biden ordered to allocate $1 billion in military assistance. It includes HIMARS, various artillery shells, and the long-promised one, Patriot air defense system. You can find the full list in the description of this video. And then the POTUS tweeted this very sweet tribute to his Ukrainian counterpart, and shortly after, the two presidents started their press conference. Here are the key takeaways from Biden. He said that we, as in him and the Congress, are expecting to sign $45 billion of additional aid to Ukraine. Him and Zelensky have absolutely the same vision of peace, and this, in my opinion, is his most significant quote of the night. He has already failed, and he knows this. He has no chance to occupy Ukraine. Then one of the journalists posed a striking question of whether the US is ready to give Ukraine all combat capabilities to liberate all of its territories, and Biden responded with a firm yes. To which Zelensky jokingly responded, "I agree," and then proceeded to share his message to Putin. What message to send to Putin? "I stand with US President Joe Biden. I respect him as a person. For me, he's a subject, a historical figure. I can send messages to him. As for Putin, in 2019 we had the Normandy meeting. Then we sent maximum messages to Putin so that in no case there would be a full-scale invasion, that there should be diplomatic solutions. He lied to everyone. What messages can be sent to him? He's no longer a subject in the civilized world." And from there he proceeded to address the Congress. The moment of his appearance in the Capitol has quite literally brought me to tears earlier. Aren't you just a little bit touched by that? And you already know that the link to the full address is going to be in the description of the video below.
It's a great honor for me to be at the US Congress and speak to you and all Americans. Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking. Thank you. And it gives me good reason to share with you our first joint victory. We defeated Russia in the battle for minds of the world. We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it. Ukrainians gained this victory, and it gives us courage, which inspires the entire world. Americans gained this victory, and that's why you have succeeded in uniting the global community to protect freedom and international law. Europeans gained this victory, and that's why Europe is now stronger and more independent than ever. The Russian tyranny has lost control over us.
That's why it's principle to continue reminding the leaders of the world what their support is accomplishing for Ukraine and for democracy globally. Which is why Biden concluded this meeting as saying, "It's important for the American people and for the world to hear directly from you, Mr. President, about Ukraine's fight and the need to continue to stand together through 2023. With that, I'm gonna let you go catch up on the whole thing through the links in the description of the video. And if you enjoyed watching this video or found it informative, please don't forget to give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next one comes out. And if you liked it so much that you would like to support my journalistic endeavors, you can do so by joining my Patreon, link in the description, or by joining this YouTube channel. And as always, check your sources and don't fall for propaganda, and I will see you on Sunday.